Hi, everyone. I'm Bruce Karasik, co-founder of the Jewish Republican Alliance. Thank you for joining us today for a special JRA Loudspeaker. Today, both Mitch and I wanted to speak directly to you about the 2022 midterm elections, the state of our country, and what we all must do going forward. Mitch will be joining me for that discussion in just a few minutes, but first, with all the challenges and disappointments that many of us are feeling and experiencing as a result of the 2022 midterm elections, as the Thanksgiving Day holiday approaches next week, I believe it is very important for us to be grateful for the many blessings that have been bestowed upon us. Hey, the Republicans won the House of Representatives. Nancy Pelosi is no longer Speaker. Brings a smile to my face. But it is also time, in all seriousness, for us to take action and fight for our freedoms and our liberties. It is a time to get involved and make a difference in our country and our communities. Since our founding, the American people, when needed, have always stepped up to be a beacon of liberty, justice, compassion, and a force for goodness and morality in the world. But now, America's in crisis. Our borders are no longer properly enforced. There's runaway inflation, shortages of essential items, high energy prices, crime, homelessness, mental illness, and moral chaos has descended upon our nation like a plague, and the state of our nation is in decline. Our weak foreign policy over the last 2 years has led us to a very dangerous place and has cost America blood and treasure. But many Americans no longer trust our government or our media. Those who present themselves as journalists or reporters now routinely, they insert their political views and their political biases into a story, or in many cases do not even report the story. Many of our people are disgusted with our election system that they believe is suspicious and questionable. After all, Americans watched numerous ordinary citizens and election workers testify during local state hearings during the 2020 election process, documenting allegations of widespread election fraud. Many of these people even signed sworn affidavits to document their claims. And when it came time for justice to be served, all the justices, right up to the Supreme Court, refused to hear the cases, not for lack of evidence, but for lack of legal standing, which fueled further frustration. Election integrity has now become a major issue. The integrity of our election system needs and to be further brought into question with outdated voter rolls, early voting, ballot harvesting, unsolicited mail-in ballots, no in-person voting, and no signature verification. It should be okay for Americans to ask the question without being called an election denier: how is it that a man who hid in his basement during the election, suffered from memory lapses and made incoherent speeches, who potentially committed illegal acts, how did he get 81 million votes, more than anyone in history? And now the question must be asked, how did a nation in such turmoil and disarray, in many instances, just re-elect the party that either caused many of the problems we are experiencing? Americans have the right to know the answers to that question. John Quincy Adams once said, "My fellow citizens, your individual liberty is your individual power. And as a power of the community is a mass compounded of powerful individuals, the nation that enjoys the most freedom in proportion to its numbers will be the most powerful nation on earth." So now more than ever, we must continue to fight for our freedom, our liberty, our free and fair elections, and the Judeo-Christian values that we hold dear. A French diplomat during the 19th century wrote, "America is great because she is good. If America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great. So thank you for all joining us today. And now it is my pleasure to introduce fellow JRA co-founder, Mitch Silberman. Mitch?
Hello, JRA community. It is always so great when we are together. So the themes I want to talk about are truth and perspective. I read a very fitting quote Monday morning. It's a little harsh, but I want to give it word for word. And it says, "The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off." There was a lot to be ticked off about this past 9 days. I'm not going to elaborate with you because you know them as well as I do. Lots of disappointment, lots of frustration, but there's truth, and the truth is there to be learned from. So what are the things that we need to learn and do better? Well, we learned that young people overwhelmingly went to the polls for the Democratic Party. We learned that we don't have a ground game like we think we should. We learned there was cheating going on. We also learned that there's a new way, Bruce calls cheat by mail, called ballot harvesting. Those are now the new rules of the game. We learned that we did not have a red tidal wave or a red tsunami. We had a red trickle or a splash. These are all things to be learned, and we have to learn, so we have to do better in the future. And that's why the truth is there. What about perspective? Well, perspective is very important, and a lot of good things really did happen. Okay, there were wins in Orange County for Congress. J.D. Vance won in Ohio. All of Florida was red. As many of you know, my new adopted home state of Tennessee was all red. At the state level, at the congressional level, even 4 constitutional amendments all passed, all for the good. There were also about 50 school boards nationwide that they switched out the radical lefties and put in patriotic moms and dads. And of course, the biggie, we took control of the House of Congress, not the numbers that we wanted, but you know what? Nancy Pelosi will no longer be Speaker of the House. Ding dong, the witch is dead. And as Mark Levin would say, that's right, I said it. So these are all good things to have perspective. And I'll leave you with a little story about perspective. So a young boy runs into the house with a bat and a ball. And he says, Dad, come outside. I want you to see what a great batter I am. So the dad comes outside, and the little boy tosses the ball, swings and misses. No biggie. He bends down, picks it up, swings and misses. This goes on over and over. He keeps throwing it up, swings and misses. And the dad is starting to get concerned, like, I want my son to stay positive. I don't want him to give up. I don't want him to get frustrated. What are some words of wisdom I can give him to make sure this turns out okay? One last time, the boy picks up the ball, swings, misses, and with a big grin on his face, he looks at his dad and says, "Pretty good pitching, huh?" That's perspective. And we have a lot of things to be grateful for. It's still the greatest country on earth. We had a lot of wins, not the win we anticipated, of course, but we have to stay strong, continue fighting for what we love, and continue to take a stand for America and Israel. Bruce, back to you.
Mitch, thank you for your great words of wisdom, as always. So I want to get right into it. One of the things that frustrate me more than anything else is not the results, but the process. I've said for the last 2 years, I didn't anticipate a red wave, not because of the issues. I've always said that Republicans are running on issues and Democrats are running on collecting ballots. The election laws in many states make it very difficult for Republicans to win or for there to be fair elections. As I outlined in my speech, if you have ballot harvesting, you have no more in-person voting, you have lack of signature verification, you have a situation where you don't even have same-day voting anymore. So wanted to throw that out to you, Mitch, and see how do we change that? Because that is really the essence of the problem, in my opinion.
It is a huge problem, Bruce. You're right. And I want to back up a little bit because that's one of many problems. Like probably most of you watching today, and if you want to be part of the show, please type in, a Q&A. We want to actually engage in your questions. You're a crucial part of the show. I'm listening to people that I deeply respect on our side. And many have brought up what you just said, Bruce, about ballot harvesting. And I think the reality is that's the game right now. It's almost like when football, I don't remember the years in the 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever, football was always a game where you handed it off and you ran. And I think it was Newt Rockne or somebody came along and said, we're going to do this thing called a pass. And at first it was frowned upon, but it changed the game. And you could say, well, I don't believe in that. Running is the way to do it. But the game has changed. And what I'm saying is, yes, there's ballot harvesting. Yes, there's cheating by mail. Yes, there's unverification. By the way, when I voted here in Tennessee last week, I waited in line for an hour and a half with fellow patriots. And you're right, they asked me for my ID. And I, of course, said, that's racist. And I didn't really say that, but I told them in our hometown that that's in California, that's considered racist. And they looked at me like I was nuts. But the point is, Bruce, these are everything you point out is accurate, but the game has changed. We have to become as good as they are, not in stealing, not in cheating, but ballot harvesting is now, I don't see how we change that. It needs to be changed. It must be changed. But until then, we have to develop a ground game and do what they're doing. That's the truth.
Well, I would love to see some sort of election law review. And I know it's based on every state has their own individual laws, but it becomes a situation where if you don't have free and fair elections, and then you're called an election denier, if you even question that there could be some inconsistencies or inaccuracies, I think that presents a real problem for the future of our country.
Well, and you just hit on something else that's really crucial. This concept of you're an election denier. It's up there with Holocaust denying in there. I mean, it's the left is brilliant at labeling us. We're always on defense. We're always, no, I'm not, no, I'm not, no, I really don't beat my wife. I promise. I mean, it's unbelievable that now this election denier thing is like gospel. And so I love someone put together a video. I think it was Carrie Lake who put together, a quotations of Hillary Clinton and all these people saying George Bush didn't win, Donald Trump didn't win, he's an illegitimate president. So it's, of course, the double standard as always, which is if we say it or do it, it's terrible. If they say or do it. Another example, I'm sure you guys heard Chucky Schmucky talk about how we have to import or give a pathway to citizenship of everyone here illegally, crooks, criminals, you name it, right? Basically, now that I'm a Southerner, okay, you know what he just said is the equivalent after the Civil War, when the Southerners said, what do you mean free the slaves? Who all is going to pick the cotton? I mean, that's pretty much what he just said. We need people here. We're not having babies. We're not having kids. We're going to have to import these people. Like, who all is going to do the work? I mean, Nancy Pelosi said the same thing. So there is so much wrong, but we have to fight fire with fire. And to be clear, I'm not saying cheating. They cheat. We're not going to cheat. But if they're ballot harvesting and we oppose it and don't do it, well, look what just happened. It's legal in California. It's legal. We have to get good at it. We need the ground game.
Well, this great video that you just talked about, highlighting some of the inconsistencies, the other concern I have, who is a co-equal partner in this problem, is, and I outlined it in my speech a little bit, is the media.
Yep.
The media will never cover that.
No.
I don't know what it's going to take to get the word out. I said the other day to somebody, wouldn't it be nice if like all 220 of the new members of the House of Representatives held a press conference or stood on Capitol Hill once a week and said, hey guys, here's what you're not covering. But it's not, the word doesn't get out. There are people during the Abraham Accords that didn't even know what was going on.
I know.
And I'm talking about Jews on the left. They didn't even know that there were, this thing just disappeared, by the way, under Biden. And now you have a United Nations that are out condemning Israel again in the United Nations. I don't know if that news ever got out to people. And as I also talked about, how does President Biden, it's hard for me to even say those two words together,
Yeah.
How did he get 81 million votes? And no one questioned anything about him.
No.
What's interesting now, Mitch, I don't know how you feel about this, is all of a sudden now we're going to control the House, and the Democrats are going to think, wow, Biden is weak. We want to get him out. So now all of a sudden the media may start looking into his misdeeds. It's almost like, oh, now you're doing it? Where
Well,
were you?
the Democrat, I think I'm quoting Rush Limbaugh of beloved memory when he said the Democratic Party is a wing of the media. They do each other's bidding. It's terrible, if you're Jewish and the high holidays, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, one of the prayers to God is the errors we've made of omission and commission, like errors we've made and things we should have done. Your point about what the media leaves out and doesn't report on is startling. It is just breathtaking. Like just today, the FBI quietly announced that there was really nothing untoward at Mar-a-Lago, meaning the raid was much ado about nothing, and actually it was really about election rigging. They quietly, and will the media report on that? No. There was also tremendous potential election fraud in Brazil. There are masses and masses of people protesting, not even putting up with it. The media is not even reporting on it. All the Hunter Biden thing, which first went from it's Russian disinformation to it can't be verified to, well, yeah, it's true. But so what the media, the errors of commission and I think even larger, the errors of omission are startling, and it does sway elections.
It certainly does. And then you add now, I mean, I'm used to during my lifetime of having an election day. Everybody goes to the polls on election day. Now, obviously, if you're out of the country or there's some reason why you physically can't get to the polls, people have the constitutional right to ask for absentee ballots. Mm-hmm. But now, for example, and this is something I wanted to bring up today, in Pennsylvania, they have a state law where you can vote up to 70 days ahead of election day. So they have this debate between Fetterman and Dr. Oz, and Fetterman just collapses. Democrats were like, oh my God, we just lost that one. No, 70% of Democrats had already voted already. Many of the votes were already cast. So even if they wanted to take back their ballots, they can't. And I think it's important to have an election day.
Well, it's supposed to be an election day. So I'm going to kind of chime in here. The two questions that I want to touch on, one from Karen S. in our audience, the other from Benjamin H. Karen asks about, election integrity and how fewer hands possible to touch the elections and who's collecting and who's handling the handlers. And also Benjamin says, what about the mayoral election, about Caruso? They're tied together, and I'll tell you why. There's an election problem because the Democrats want an election problem. This is easily solved. Someone posted, an American Idol that can tally 150 million votes over a commercial break. But yet here we're a week and a half out and going, well, we're still counting. And with regard to Caruso and regard to all who's handling the votes, that famous, communist that said it's not who votes that counts, it's who counts the votes. They want this problem. They want this confusion. And I will tell you, statistically, you would think if you looked at races and said, wow, when it was close and it went a week out or a few days out, how often did a Republican win versus the Democrat? You would say probably 50-50. No, it's closer to 70-30 or 80-20. The Democrat wins. So the moment they said, we're not done counting, it's almost as if they're like, well, how many votes do we need? Let's go get them. So these problems are intentional. It could be solved by one-day voting, show voter ID, and you can do absentee voting can be done securely, not just mail-in votes and drop boxes.
Yeah, it has to be changed. And how is it done? By people getting involved on a local level and on a state level and a national level. We want to provide those opportunities through JRA Nation as we grow in our chapters to provide people to get opportunities to get involved. But unfortunately, what we're seeing in a lot of states is it's an uninformed electorate. and they'll see a D or an R next to somebody's name, and they'll vote for a D or an R, and in a lot of cases, just a D, without even knowing anything about the issues or what it stands for. I think that's very, very concerning to me. I'm looking here, Drew H. says, we have an issue here in Las Vegas with a big influence with Republican Party leadership with the Proud Boys. Any suggestions? It's unfortunate that Nevada has followed along with California rules, and they're doing exactly what California is doing. For everybody who doesn't know, we've opened up a new chapter in Las Vegas. It's a great group of people. Mitch and I were there in October. We had an amazing group together. And we're very excited about that chapter. And unfortunately, Nevada have a lot of the similar problems that California has. And until we're able to make some changes, it's going to continue.
Yeah, and Bruce, I want to key in on a word you use, which is uninformed, or as Rush used to say, low information voters. So this FTX scandal happened, okay? If you're watching this show, you are ultra informed, you're engaged, you're an activist, and God bless you. But the average person isn't. But some people are now starting to hear about this FTX thing, and this goes back to the media bias, right? And on the surface, all the reporting is, oh, it's a Ponzi scheme, and it was, and oh, it's a scandal, and it was. But guess what? This guy, the head of it, they call him SBK now, Sam Bank something Freed. Sadly, he's Jewish, which doesn't reflect well on us, but he was the second largest donor to the Democratic Party. Second, about $40 million. Number one is that evil person, George Soros. And it's like, wait a minute, he was donating all this money to the Democratic Party, and there's fraud and money disappeared. Like, can you imagine if it was a Republican mega donor? It'd be front page of they would be snooping and what, is there some connection? Did he funnel money to the Democratic Party? How do you, I mean, and there's just it's in the business section that it was just another scandal. And there it is again, media bias. And we don't want to talk how it benefited the Democratic Party. So specific races and Democrats that benefited from this corruption, not even going to touch it.
Yeah, it's so true, Mitch. It's very frustrating. Gary B, why do you think the GOP didn't have a more unified and robust response to Biden's hypocrisy in his disingenuous labeling on election deniers when they've been the worst offenders in that area? Is the establishment GOP complicit? Is it truly a uniparty?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's part of the problem. There was an election year coming up, and it's been said that the Democrats are the dangerous party, but Republicans are the stupid party. And sometimes it's better to vote for the stupid party over the dangerous party. But if there was a more powerful, unified Republican Party that spoke out with the same passion and made sure that their word got out, there's ways with media to do that. I think we may be able to change some minds. Information and education is the key to it all. If people are educated, they may look at things in a different way.
So you mentioned another keyword, Bruce, unifying our party. There's a question from one of my favorite JRA members, Barack L. He's the good Barack. And he says, can we talk about DeSantis and Trump? Yes, Barack, we can. This is a very complex situation. As many of you know, I am Team Trump. I'm in awe of what he accomplished, especially for the Jewish community, but not just the Jewish community, for Israel, America, world peace, you name it. The list of things he accomplished are mind-boggling. I was very saddened and concerned when he unprovoked last week attacked Youngkin and DeSantis. And then I watched his speech Tuesday night, and it was magnificent. He was disciplined, he was focused, his tone was different. he was amazing. Ron DeSantis, his record and his demeanor really are just incredible. So on the one hand, we have a great bench. We have two very capable leaders. And there are people I deeply respect that say, and I'm going to give both sides because I'm kind of in the middle. So I understand, and I don't like being in the middle. I like clarity. Clarity is power. But I appreciate and respect people who say, Trump has already done it. No one else is as strong as him. He woke us up about the swamp. He took on both parties. He's uncovered so much fraud. We owe it to him, and he did it before. He can do it again. Can't argue with that. Then I also hear, look at what DeSantis has done in Florida, turned it red. Okay. And I've heard the saying he's kind of like Trump without the baggage. Okay. And Trump's time has passed and needs to pass the torch. They're all valid. The only comment I want to make is this. Whoever runs, they will say, let's just pretend for a moment that Trump bows out, okay? Which I don't think, but let's just pretend for a moment. Whoever runs, DeSantis or a choir boy, they will say he is literally Hitler. He's worse than Trump. He's the most evil, vile person in the world. They're going to say that about whoever runs. So it's a tough situation.
Mitch, I can't agree more with you. I mean, everything you said is really how I feel. I was concerned with his comments, and I think the concern that Republicans are hearing from people who do not like President Trump is, his time has passed. He'll never get elected. So I think there's two separate parts of this equation. Does anybody think, based on Trump's resume and his past experience, if he was miraculously elected in 2024, that he would be a bad president? I just don't think so. I mean, his record of accomplishment, his support for Jews and for Israel, his foreign policy, the economy was singing. I mean, if you go to his list of accomplishments, you will be amazed at what he's accomplished. I think there needs to be that conversation. And if DeSantis chooses to run, or Pence, or whoever just chooses to run, that's America. It's free and open discussion. Our party will choose its nominee. But yes, whether it's DeSantis or anybody else, if whoever's nominated, once it becomes the actual main election, they will be ripped apart by the media and the Democratic Party. In fact, the reason why I think Trump is so despised by the Democrats is, for years, Republicans have been punching bags to the Democrats. They called racist, bigoted, homophobic. You hated the old people. You're trying to steal, just the most insulting things, and no one ever fired back. He was the first one that had the guts and the ability to use their own words and go right back at them. And so I think that's why he's hated, because when he won, every speech, he just rubbed it, right in their face.
Well,
but as from a technical point of view, he was a great president, in my opinion.
Unequivocally. I mean, you can try this with some people I did it with someone I love in my life, and she was very honest about it. So what I said was, I know you hate President Trump. I'm not going to argue about that. This is what I said to a family member. But let's get him out of the picture. But what if I told you that Hillary was president now, or Biden was president now, and we had peace in the Middle East, record unemployment for Black and Hispanic and women, low inflation, record stock market. I mean, the list goes on. And then she interrupted me and she said, I would say it's a great presidency. And I'm like, well, so the challenge with Trump is precisely what you just said. He is polarizing, but what people don't realize about President Trump is he's the world's largest, hardest counterpuncher. He rarely picks fights, but he won't take it from anyone. That's the whole point. And the fact that when people said, oh, he's so divisive, and I just said, you mean he fought back? That's what you're upset about? That I'm tired of the armchair Republicans, the limousine cruise Republicans that want to lose like a gentleman. We can't have candidates anymore that want to lose like a gentleman. You got to be a street fighter. You don't have to be down to their level. but you got to fight. President Trump fought back. He wouldn't take, you know what, from anybody. And for that, they called him divisive. And I say, you know what? Yeah, he's a bull in a china shop. He's our bull in the china shop. And he is the kind of guy that if you come after him, he's going to run over you with the bus and he's going to back up to make sure he got you. That's how he rolls. And they call that divisive.
So we have a comment from Linda A. Please specify get involved. What does it mean to you beside donate money? I volunteered. The in-person ballots never even reached the site we were at. Linda, I understand your frustration with the ballot situation. I really do. Getting involved means volunteering your time, going to events, getting educated. People who are uninformed will not make decisions. People who are uninformed cannot be able to persuade others. But we do have a voice. And the more people that lend their voice by attending, by speaking out, by attending these type of things that we're doing, it encourages others to do the same. When you get involved, you are becoming a leader. You are making a difference. And unfortunately, it does take money to be able to spread the word. And we are in the process of trying to raise the money that we need to be able to take this on a national level, as well as having very local, strong communities. And that's what our job is. And we're not staying on the sideline. We are making a difference.
There's an important comment here from Zena G, and she talks about essentially messaging. And she's right. These days, people are voting from their guts and passion. What's good for me counts. They don't care about substantive issues, unfortunately. It's a good point. But I will tell you, if you're on this call, unless you're a spy, you share our values, right? And the Democratic Party has been brilliant at messaging. They just have. You may say, yeah, but we don't like their message. Yeah, but it's bad for America. Yeah, but all you want. But they are brilliant at messaging. Our side has to get much better at that. And the thing that frustrates me, and I would love to hear from our audience chime in, they don't seem to connect the dots. So my personal frustration has been this. I understand if you're voting for Santa Claus. I understand if you're a young person saying I'm voting for Biden because he's gonna forgive my student loan. I don't agree, but I get it. Okay. What I have the most frustration with, and I guarantee everyone watching has people in their life like this. You have friends in your life or family. They're wonderful people. They're charitable. They're productive Americans. They're probably, business owners or well-paid. They're incredible Americans. They're pretty informed, not the same sources as us, and they constantly vote Democrat. And the frustration has been with record inflation and record volatility in the stock market and crime. And the party is in charge of creating all of that, and that's still not enough to get our side overwhelmingly elected. That is the frustration. We can crack that. I'd love to hear what the audience has to say. If we can crack that puzzle, boy, that would make a huge difference right there.
Mitch, you're so right. I mean, here's just two headlines from today that I looked at. Democrat-run Philadelphia, gas station carjackings more than quadrupled in 2022. Here's another one. Fentanyl shipment bus spike in Mexican border state. Dial measuring voter response, Dems 50-50 on crime. I saw something. This was, I think I may have mentioned it to you, Mitch, but I'll mention it now on the air. So have you ever seen, they have those groups where they're sitting and they're getting questions as they watch a speaker speak. They have a dial, and they can, if they like something, they can dial it up from 0 to 100. If they hate it, they can dial it down. And these pollsters are looking at it and measuring voter response. So I saw one where someone was talking about crime. I don't remember which state it was in, and it was mentioning the problem with crime. The Republicans dialed it up all high. Democrats were 50-50 on crime. In other words, they didn't even say like, oh, I'm concerned about crime. It was not even an issue for them. And I think that divide is a real problem when the issues of one side are so important and the issues of the other side are not as important. And I think it can only change with education and for people being informed.
Well, informed and having it affect them personally. You know, I'm gonna digress a little bit. We have a question that Bruce and I get a lot from Stu B about what we affectionately call the other guys. There's another Republican organization that has Jewish in its name, and we think highly of them. In fact, Bruce and I were very involved with the other group many years ago. So his question is, what's the difference between us and them? And I'll tell you, we need everyone on our side to pull to win, okay? Our group was founded 6.5 years ago for anyone who's willing to take a stand for America and Israel. It matters not if you're Republican, Democrat, Jewish, Christian, atheist, Muslim. If you love America and you love Israel, then we welcome you here. This is a place for you where your voice can be heard and you can get involved. So ours has been and always will be a grassroots organization. You know, gone are the days where you scream at the TV or throw down the newspaper in frustration. The key is, what are you going to do about it? So we want you to get involved. And a lot of these questions today are, what can I do? What do you mean by get involved? And what I would say is this. If I was a rabbi, and I'm not, but if I was a rabbi and someone came to me and said, you know, Rabbi, I'm thinking of joining a temple. Well, my preference is you join my temple, right? But if you don't join my temple, at least join a temple. Judaism needs you. You need Judaism. You need to get involved. Same thing with the JRA. If you want to get involved, you want to donate, you want to volunteer, you want to host a parlor meeting, you want to help fundraise, great. We would love to have you. But if it's not the JRA, make sure you're doing something that helps America and helps Israel. There are many fine organizations out there that need your help, your time, your passion, your money. We're one of them. The key is to get involved and help create the future you and your family so richly deserve.
That's well done, Mitch. And to add to that, one of the main differences I would say is our grassroots approach. It's really important to us, and it's always been our vision, to have local communities throughout the country that met on a regular basis, that became friends, that did business together, that actually formed a community and a home, as opposed to a top-down organization. It's a different approach, but the value that we see from having local communities all linked together, kind of like the United States, I think it has tremendous value, and nobody else is doing what we're doing right now.
As a matter of fact, several years ago, the RNC reached out to us, and I was like, how did they hear about us? And they did. And they said, no one, to echo what Bruce said, they said, no one's doing what you're doing. No one is on a grassroots level reaching out to Jewish Republicans across the country. As a matter of fact, about 6 months ago, Ron DeSantis' campaign reached out to us and said, you know, would the JRA be willing to put on an event for him? Of course, my question was, how did Ron DeSantis and his campaign hear about the JRA? So I'm thrilled. We do have members all across the country. You know, we need everyone to get involved. I'm gonna take a question here from this is a third rail. You're not supposed to talk about it, but that's okay. From Mark S. And he says, unfortunately, abortion played a large role in this election. So that was, and I'm going to talk about that for a second. This goes back to Bruce's earlier points about the media bias. Somebody in the Supreme Court leaked this decision. And gee, we just can't figure out who did it. The FBI won't tell us. The FBI won't even investigate it. That helped throw the election. The Democrats said, they went crazy and said, oh my God, they're repealing Roe v. Wade. You can't have abortions. Well, the first part's true. They did repeal Roe v. Wade. The second part is false. All they said was it's going to go back to the states. So if anyone in California wants an abortion, let me rephrase that. If a woman, not, what do they call them? Men, no, men cannot get pregnant. Let me state that on the record. Men cannot get pregnant. If a woman wants an abortion in California, the decision of the Supreme Court will not interfere with that, okay? If a woman in a red state wants an abortion, she will have access to a state that does allow abortion, okay? So it did play a role. It is a very hot topic. And it's a tough one because there are people in the Republican Party that are pro-life and pro-choice. So it's a very tough one, but it didn't work to their advantage in the last election.
That's very true. I wanted to bring up, and I wanted to kind of hand off the conversation to talk about Georgia and Herschel Walker right now. So right now, as we stand, the Senate is 50 for the Democrats, 49 for the Republicans. And I think one of the reasons that it's important for us to have this election go in favor of the Republicans is we need to be at least 50-50, because then if one Democrat wavers, at least we can move on from that. If we're 51-49, that puts us in a real hole.
Well, I know before the election, we were hearing projections about 53-47 and 52-48, and yet here we are. And one of the best things I saw that came out of the election in the last few days is Brian Kemp. Even though he didn't win twice against Stacey Abrams, according to her, he is willing to lend his organization to Herschel Walker. So I don't know the details of it, but he came out and he's going to help Herschel Walker. And that could be donor rolls, it could be voter registration, it could be volunteers. But I'm so grateful for Governor Kemp that he publicly said he's going to help Herschel Walker win. That, you know what, Bruce, that shouldn't be a close race either, but it was. And someone typed in, one of our audience members typed in, it just seems that when there's a close race, they go, well, how many votes do we need? Let's go get them. And just like in LA, Caruso is ahead, which surprised me. And I said last week, watch, they're going to keep counting till they get enough votes for her. And voila, that's what happened.
Going back to another comment from our friend Kim M. She brought up the Trump issue again. And the question is, can Trump win? Is he going to be a punching bag for the Democrats, and can he win? She said if they can elect Fetterman and Biden, we're in big trouble, and we realize it's a great point. And I think whoever the Republicans nominate is going to be that punching bag. I looked at the electoral map for 2024. I think it's a tough road for any Republican to win. Looking at the states the way they're aligned now, and between now and 2024 is an eternity in politics, but it's going to create some real challenges for Republicans. I mean, they need to win Pennsylvania, they need to win Arizona. It looks like Florida is something they're going to win, but a lot of the states that President Trump won, I'm not sure are still in play anymore as of today. For any Republican.
Yeah, I mean, Florida was red, became purple, bluish, and now is soundly red again, because DeSantis he's a proven leader. They don't want to give him credit for anything, but look at the way he handled the hurricane. I mean, look at the way he handled everything. He's truly remarkable. And the one thing I will say about President Trump, and again, I'm a fan. Most of I was blessed. We went to 2 White House Hanukkah parties with President Trump. I was on the White House lawn when he signed the Abraham Accord. I'm a huge fan, but there's a point that one of you made that's very true, which is there are some Democrats or some independents that will either begrudgingly or gladly vote for Ron DeSantis should he run. But there's a huge portion of Democrats and independents that under no circumstance would vote for President Trump. To your point, Bruce, they are misinformed. The media has been incredibly effective as painting him as this monster, and that's all they see. I mean, a poll came out recently, not a poll, but an analysis that something like 87% of the media's coverage about anything Republican candidate or party is negative. And if that's all you see, if that's all your consumption, I have a dear friend that said, oh, I don't look at, get this, I don't look at news sites that are too biased either way. I don't look at Fox, I don't look at CNN. I say, okay, good, keep going. So I've decided to get my news from British BBC and PBS, and I was like, oh my goodness, those are so biased to the left, right? And that's kind of what we're up against. If all you get is if you're bombarded with leftism, then you think Republicans are terrible, Trump is a monster, and the list goes on and on and on.
Well, to your point, Mitch, I don't know that Fox is as conservative as
Not
many
anymore.
people think. I think if you look, I don't know who many of our audience probably watches Tucker Carlson. I think he has I don't agree with everything he says, obviously, but I think he has some real fine journalists on his staff that are really investigating some things. I saw a report the other day where he had this whistleblower that was in shadows, and he's talking about how Biden was on a phone call in 2012 and doing business dealings with things that he shouldn't be involved in. And it was really an amazing story. And the rest of Fox News never covered it. And his next guest was Dana Perino. So he finishes this, what I thought was like an explosive report. And Dana Perino comes on, and the subject never even comes up. She never even said, like, oh my God, I can't believe what you just said. We're going to talk about that on the 5 tomorrow. It's like it never happened. So I don't know that they're doing their job. Tucker is, but I don't think the rest of the network is.
Yeah, there's been a real shift in Fox, and from what I understand, it's attributed to the fact that Rupert Murdoch has handed off the reins to his adult children, and one of them is a big Biden supporter, so that's unfortunate. You know, we have an anonymous attendee who said, Dems are so convinced Republicans are demons, they would vote for anyone with a D after their name. And this is something Bruce has said. It's almost like teams, very tribal. And so something that I've said in the past, and I think it's very relevant today, I have to tell you, in California, as you all know, you have to assume whoever you're talking to is a liberal, right? Here in Tennessee, it's safe to assume almost everyone you talk to is a conservative. But here's the difference. Even if they're not a conservative, they're going to be polite, okay? So I think one of the best things you can do is be a shining example. People in your life, let them know, if they don't already, that you are a conservative. Because it kind of creates a little cognitive dissonance in them where they realize, well, Republicans are terrible, but you're nice. And sometimes someone will say, you're a Republican? So just being a shining example of you're a good American, you're a good person, sometimes can sway people because they realize, wow, well, maybe I have to rethink that.
You know, you brought up a really great point, Mitch. It's no accident that the Jewish Republican Alliance was founded in California, which is a blue state, because when you feel like you're alone, when you feel like your opinions either don't matter or you start questioning them, if you get into a room with 1,200 other Republicans on a big event or 100 people on a local event, and you can go up to anyone in that room and make a friend in 2 minutes, it makes you feel empowered, less alone, and you start having the sense of feeling validated for your opinions. And that is one of the main goals of the Jewish Republican Alliance.
Yeah, you need to know you're not alone. So this is a really good point from one of our watchers today, John P. And I'm going to read what he wrote because it's very brief and I want to address it. Dems can place a corpse as a candidate and win, which they did in, I think it was New York, as long as mail-in ballots are in play. They have legalized ballot harvesting. It's the perfect crime. And we have amazing patriots that are part of the JRA, and some of them are watching right now because I see the comments that say we can't stoop to that level. That's, you know, and I get that. I respect that. What I'm getting at is the game has changed. Ballot harvesting is legal in California. I don't know about other states. I know where it's not legal, like Florida, they didn't cheat. But California is firmly Democrat. It is legal ballot harvesting. If we say, well, that's beneath us, we won't do that. Look what just happened. So, you know, we have to do what's in the confines of the law. And right now that is legal.
I agree. Well, Barack L., our friend, has some positive news that he wants us to talk about. He said, don't forget to tell the good news. 6% increase in Jewish voting, Republican. Jewish vote now 33%. You know, that is such good news. And I think we can, with some hard work, make those numbers even better as we get our message across the country. But one of the things that is happening in the Jewish community is the rabbis are using their pulpit as a way of presenting their views that happen to be on the left. I don't usually see that from rabbis that I see that are conservative. And I think that's something that should not happen. I think a rabbi should have the ability to, in private or in his own private life, do whatever he wants to do and say what he wants to say. I just don't think that the pulpit is a place for a rabbi to be espousing his political views.
Yeah, I will say, in the Conejo Valley, there's Rabbi Michael Barkley, and for the longest time, I wasn't sure, based on his public persona, if he was Republican or Democrat, and I thought that was wonderful, as that should be. But what he was unabashedly pro-Israel, and he will call out Republicans or Democrats that are anti-Semites, and he did. He called them out by name one year at High Holiday Services, and that I applaud. But the truth is, if you're going to church or temple, you should be learning about your faith. And the moment they start preaching, in fact, I have one friend that went to a temple we used to belong to a long time ago. And the new rabbi is a young guy, very likable, very, charming. And he said, the rabbi had me until he told my daughter that, isn't it wonderful you get to choose which gender you are now? And you're hearing that from a rabbi? You don't want to hear that from a rabbi. So where it's always one-sided. It seems that whenever you have rabbis or preachers or priests proselytizing about the evils of one political party, it always seems to come about demonizing, maybe not demonizing the Republican Party, but at least promoting the liberal party agenda. And it's not right.
To further on Barack's point, we as Jews should be able to come together at least on the issue of combating anti-Semitism and support for Israel. And when I say support for Israel, not saying like, oh, Israel can never do anything wrong, like America can't do anything wrong, of course, but to fairly judge Israel. When Nikki Haley was in the UN and President Trump was the president, it was well known that they would not let anybody talk down the Israeli government or the nation, and they were holding other nations accountable if they ever did. I don't see that happening under the current administration. In fact, there was just a recent vote condemning Israel, and I don't understand how Jews on the left are okay with that, other than they say to me, well, Israel is not my number one issue.
Well, something I learned a long time ago, Bruce, and I'm sure many in the audience had the same thing, is if you're born Jewish, you're Jewish. But if you don't have Judaism in your life, then you're just born Jewish. And Israel is not only not a top priority, but in many ways, you've given up Judaism for liberalism. And in the liberals world, or I should say the leftist world, Israel's the bad guy. Why? Because they're the oppressor. And the poor Palestinians are the oppressed. And if you're on the left, you side with the oppressed. So it's terrible. Or they say it's a shanda, right? It's no good. But it's we have to combat that.
Yeah, especially now that prominent figures, Kanye West, Kyrie Irving, and others come out, and it's Dave Chappelle and others come out. And it's now fair game to come out and attack Jews and Judaism. And, you know, I'm glad some of these people are experiencing some repercussions. That Kanye West lost some money. He tarnished his image. Kyrie Irving was suspended. You know, I'm happy to see that. I mean, it could be a lot worse if people are allowed to continue that in America.
Well, it does seem a double standard. You know, you say anything bad about other minorities. I mean, Jews are minorities. I once asked a non-Jewish friend, what percent of the world do you think is Jewish? And he's like, I don't know, 30, 40%, 20%. I said, it's like 0.2%. I mean, it's minuscule. But you say something bad about Blacks or Hispanics or women or Asian, and that's it, you're canceled. You say something bad about Jews for the most part, it's like, well, you know, it's, you know, they don't even report on the rapid anti-Semitism that's going on in New York. Or talk about the media bias and the errors of omission and commission. For the longest time, the media was saying, isn't it terrible, all the violence against Asians? Well, they left out one little fact. Who's committing this violence against the Asians? Overwhelmingly, it's Black people. Now, you can say that's racist. No, that's numbers, that's accuracy, that's statistics, but they leave that part out. So anti-Semitism, you know, it's unfortunate, but you get away with it for the most part, not always, not recently. But other types of bigotry, not tolerated.
Well, we will continue to speak out against that. And I hope a lot of our fellow Jews continue to do that. And one of the things that's important for us to note here in America, and this is really important, is that religious Christians support Jews and Israel more than many Jews on the left do. And we all need to be very grateful for that support, because a lot of times Christians now are under attack. And I think that we need to also step up as Jews to support those Christians who are also under attack for their viewpoints in America.
Yeah. There's, I think Dennis Prager pointed out, there's Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, but there's no word for Christian bigotry. I can't think of one, right?
Well, it's really important that we continue to speak out, because that is the only thing that will change things, is educating people, uniting and energizing people so they show up for elections, changing election laws, and making sure that we lobby our leaders to make sure that they do the right thing for us. Yeah. Well, everyone, I want to thank you for joining us and for taking part. We loved all your comments and questions, and feel free to email us with any further ones. We want you all involved. You know, in 1961, JFK, who was a Democrat, he'd probably be a Republican today, said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I think it's really important that that is the mentality that we have to have now. It cannot be how much is the government giving you, is what can you do to give back to America to make it the country that we all love. How can you help? You can get involved. You can make a difference. Hold a parlor meeting for us. Send us an email. We'd love you to do that. We need to get our word out, and the only way we're going to do that if we raise the capital to be able to do that. So we're counting on you in doing that. Mitch and I are working hard to do that. We appreciate your involvement. We appreciate all of you and all you've done for us by getting involved and supporting us. Your support means the world to us. We want to make sure that next week you and your families know that we are thinking about you and wishing you a very, very happy Thanksgiving, and be grateful for all the blessings that have been bestowed on us. Until that day, we wish you a very, very happy holiday season, and we look forward to talking with you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.